Hello and welcome once again to episode 87 of Code Completion. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
So last week was WWDC, and there was a ton of new information that came out. So we decided to pick one focus group of that and focus on it. So SwiftUI specifically got a ton of useful additions this year, and I think I don't know if this marks its glow up moment, because Apple did specifically call out hey, we kind of expect this to be the future for our platforms, and AppKit and UIKit are still supported like Objective-C, but kind of on their way out. They strongly held that opinion, whereas lots of people on Twitter, as usual, are well, that's great and all, but SwiftUI is not ready yet. And it's very interesting because you definitely have two camps of people. A camp that is completely fine using SwiftUI for everything and seems to run into very few issues with it, in the grand scheme of building a well-built app. And then you have people who don't touch it with a 10-foot stick because they're kind of afraid of what it might do. And I think this comes down to the experience that you get when using a lot of SwiftUI, more so than the maturity of the framework, because there are loose edges. Don't get me wrong, it's not the perfect framework, and I don't think this year's additions necessarily make it the perfect framework either. But if you do get to know it quite a bit, then you learn where those loose edges are, and you either don't use them in that way, or you work around them very easily by tapping into UI View or NS View representable. Sure. And that allows you to get most of the functionality that you would otherwise not have in SwiftUI. I would say most of the additions to SwiftUI this year are not necessarily additions to SwiftUI's core, though there are some pieces, which we'll get into, which are relevant there. But they're basically just new wrappers around existing code that make things make more sense. So yeah, if you have had trouble using SwiftUI in an app, and you were perhaps just using it in one place and it bit you, I would not say that that's the opportunity to say SwiftUI is no good at all. I would go ahead and instead say probably start off with one of Apple's excellent tutorials, because those will get you into the mindset of how to use SwiftUI effectively. And if you are using SwiftUI effectively, then you will run into less of the sharp edges that still exist in the framework that might never necessarily go away. They're sharp edges because the framework is not really meant to be used in that way, or because those parts of the framework rely heavily on bridging UIKit or AppKit to SwiftUI, and therefore there's a ton of moving parts that might break at any one given moment. So I had a deep dive on this thought process on Twitter, so I'll link the thread in the show notes. But that's where I would say SwiftUI stands. What would you say, Spencer?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, where it seems like there are a lot of kind of, I guess I would call them quality of life improvements, but nothing I can't remember exactly how you said it, but nothing kind of to its core, but kind of some, ease of use type of thing. So one thing I can think of is, I'm fairly sure we've talked about this in a previous episode, but making two views have the same width, right? And kind of figuring that out. And Dimitri shared an awesome snippet of code that would do that in one of the sessions, and I can't remember which one. They're all blending together. They go over how you can make buttons have the same width, or I can't remember if it's buttons or segmented controls, but It's, 3 buttons with some short text, some long text, and some other medium text maybe. And SwiftUI's kind of behavior would be to just size it appropriately to the size of the text. But the whole thing was, what if you want them all to be the same width? And so they go into some new API that will let you sort of say, hey, basically size this according to whatever you want. And then in that case, he said, make sure that it will fit whatever the largest text is, and then have those all be equal widths. And so sort of a quality of life thing where you could do that before, but now it's probably going to be less code that you have to write, and it's more of a built-in thing. So yeah, that was kind of my takeaway. I mean, there are some new things, but anything that you could do, you can probably just do a little easier now in some cases.
Yeah, it's
like go for it.
It requires less proficiency to get where everyone wanted to be, if that makes any sense.
Exactly. Like the first example that we have here is layout, and one of the things that I came to Dimitri for probably about a year ago was how to lay out that number pad in LumaFusion, kind of have everything be equal widths. I say like I want this to be like 4 buttons wide, or 4 buttons wide, like 6 buttons vertically. How do I lay those out? And some have different sizes and stuff. That was something I couldn't figure out on my own, and I needed Dimitri to help me with that. Now there's this new layout API that has built-in API for a grid, and it makes sizing those things very, very easy. Where before I could do that with Dimitri's help, but now I could probably figure it out on my own and just get that done to have this like hard-coded grid in where it's not changing. So again, just improvements and ease of use kind of APIs.
Yeah, so grid is a specific type of layout, and it works kind of like lazy HGrid or lazy VGrid, except instead of not knowing the complete size of your view in one or the other dimensions, it does. It calculates every subview, and it takes those into account to lay them out appropriately into different rows. And you can have different views span different rows, and it all takes that into account pretty nicely and pretty succinctly. Now, Grid, HStack, and VStack are all now part of a new layout protocol. And layout protocol, I believe, is a protocol that inherits from Vue. So you are a Vue automatically, but you get 2 magical methods that allow you to get the size of your subviews and determine what size they should be. And second, to position those subviews where you want them to be. So this is kind of like the magic piece that was missing in the layout engine that gives you direct control over how big stuff is downstream and where you want it to be. In the past, you would have had to mess around with preference keys to pass the view sizes upstream, and then to reframe them literally with .frame to give them a new size, or to position them with offset within a top leading Z stack. So not ideal, but still possible. And this gets rid of a whole ton of gotchas with that, because that could create a feedback loop where you ask for the size of the subview, then you set the size, and then therefore the size of the subview changes, so it tells you there's a new size. And if that stabilizes, you're fine. But if that never stabilizes, it's going to basically be an infinite loop. I don't think it would stall the program, but everything would flash back and forth, or it would crash if you hit a certain attribute. And if you looked at an attribute the wrong way, I'm sure you've all seen a SwiftUI crash where it mentions like, oh, there's an attribute involved, and you have no idea what's going on. So that's generally caused by like messing around with preference keys, to be honest. So it's good to be gone with that kind of hindrance and be able to directly get the size of subviews and account for that in your layout. So that enables all sorts of things. You can have a flowing layout where just like text flows to the next line, you can have views flow to the next line, and have that all just work. You can go ahead and have a waterfall layout. I think this was made Iconic by Pinterest, where you just have like different columns, and things just flow to the next column in a very natural way. Or you can have a crazy wackadoodle circular layout. And this would just be like a circle, and that's how things are, and how you want them to be. So all sorts of layouts are now possible with this. And one of the coolest ones that I think is a little undermentioned was View That Fits. And View That Fits is special in that it takes its subviews one at a time, and it will take the first one that fits. So it asks how big it wants to be, and if there's not enough room for that, it goes for the next one, and so on and so forth. And this is great for adaptable layouts because you can go ahead and just have a few variations instead of having a geometry reader at the top level that injects a width all the way down, so that way you know exactly how much space you have, and then you have an if condition based on the width, and then if it's between this number and this number, you have this layout. If it's between this number and this number, you have this layout. And that generally was a huge pain to get exactly right, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to that same WWDC session, I think it's called Compose Custom Layouts with SwiftUI or something like that. He goes over that as well, and it's very cool to see in his example. I can't remember if it was a segmented control or not. I think it was. But with those equal width buttons, there was a point where I can't remember if it was due to like localization and the text being longer, but somehow he got that segmented control to be way out of the bounds of the width of the screen. And so he used View That Fits to basically say, okay, well, if there isn't enough width that way, each button has its own full width, and then it was able to kind of correctly present those views in a way that would actually fit on the screen. So I'm super interested in that because not that we're using SwiftUI a ton in LumaFusion, but we, support iPad and Mac with the Apple Silicon versions, but we also support iPhones. And so making everything fit very well in a bunch of different screen sizes is going to be really cool. So yeah, I thought that was a super cool way of doing that. And I mean, he goes over, like, going back to like the circular views, he has an example of like ranking pets basically, and it was like a dog, a cat, and a fish in this like very cool sort of first, second, and third kind of vertically, but then the actual views were kind of in this triangular, circular, rotating view. It was very cool to see kind of the flexibility there. But also with that, we'll kind of, I'm sure, get into this more as we go on. But it was all animatable, and that I think was a huge part of like everything that I saw with SwiftUI is like everything is animatable. Whether it's these layouts going from, again, like the View That Fits, maybe something changes on the screen, and then the view that you were using doesn't work and it has to go to the next view. That's all animatable. He goes to like. Right. So like Dimitri mentioned, H stack and V stack are also layouts. And so what if everything is first place, everything has the same amount of votes in that dog, cat, or fish thing? Well, you can't make a sort of everything's fit in first place with a circular layout. And so he goes from that circular custom layout to an H stack, putting everything on that first row. And it just animated all very fluidly. So that's, I think, super exciting to just make everything transition well between, layouts or whatever it is, different charts and everything. So super exciting that's kind of it seems very much like a first class citizen, very front of mind issue to make sure that everything animates well. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's all made possible with a new type erase to any layout, because all layouts essentially work the same way in that they have the same subviews. So this is a special type erased view that you actually are allowed to and encouraged to use, because it will not throw away its subviews when it happens to be a different layout. And that's the key piece. And I think part of this was the fact that the closure that's now passed to layout is not necessarily passed as an initializer. And this is a key piece, because when you make in any layout, you basically have your if conditional. Oh, if it's this, it's going to be an H stack. If it's this, it's going to be a circular. If it's this, it's going to be a V stack.
Yeah.
And you make your stack at that point. And then afterwards, you're calling your stack as if it were a function with curly braces. And this is what the do or call as, I think it's called. There's like a call as function. There's a specific protocol and feature in Swift where you can have a type be called as a function. And I think they're using it here to basically inject the subviews later. And that's what makes any layout be special. So it's not just an any type like Swift kind of introduced this year. And we'll probably go over those in a future episode. But this is a brand new way to kind of shift layouts in very, very interesting ways because it gives you a lot of flexibility. So next, I would say the next biggest thing that I'm excited about are new support for good previews throughout Xcode. So it seems like Apple focused a ton on making sure that previews in SwiftUI don't break on you anymore. They are always running. You don't have to make a ton of, in the past you were limited to 15 previews that you make yourself. Now you don't have to make those 15 previews. There are automatic preview sets for dynamic type, accessibility, device sizes. That's just all supported. So you don't really have to make a ton of previews yourself, and you can just take advantage of Xcode's pre-built views into these different previews. And I am definitely excited for this.
Yeah, that's super cool. That's one thing that we talked about last week where I think we both lamented that previews were not quite up to snuff, at least what we thought they could be. So I'm interested to see. I didn't catch a ton of that, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but did they mention anything with I don't know. I mean, maybe the sessions themselves are a little misleading. It seems like the previews just always update, and refresh as soon as they put in more code, like their code snippets. Did they mention any improvements there with modifying code, it actually resuming on its own, or?
Yeah, they did. So specifically, they called out that the update cadence is now dynamic. So it's no longer, if you're typing and you now have some errors, it's going to pause your preview and then nothing is going to work. So along with Xcode 14's new error handling, where if you have a source code error, then as you start fixing it, it'll kind of gray it out because it knows you're kind of working on it, right? You've recognized that the error exists, and Xcode has recognized that you're trying to fix it. So it stops getting in your way. And it seems like the previews will just continue running during this period. They just won't necessarily update until the next point in time where it's compilable. So this means that the previews basically should never pause. They also mentioned that it will try and automatically build an app to kind of contain the preview in the case of packages and stuff like this. However, I still ran into some compatibility here in the app we're working on. So I'm not sure if it still needs some specific work. If I needed to mark all my previews as public, I don't really know exactly what was wrong there. But there are still some parts that seem to be in flux in this new beta of Xcode. But generally speaking, it seems like things should be a ton more capable in the long run.
That's great to hear. That's something that's been a sticking point for me is just you change one thing and like you said, as soon as Xcode realizes there's an error, it's like, no, I gotta stop. I can't do this. So that's good. That's awesome. I think one huge thing also, it's not necessarily related to SwiftUI, but just Xcode in general has been getting better and better. Last couple, Xcode 12, I think was pretty good, and then Xcode 13's been good. I think the the icon switch in the files was the weirdest thing, but overall, auto completion is faster. Maybe that's just because of having a MacBook Pro that is actually okay. But they're making good improvements to Xcode. We were talking about a couple of them in our Slack group, and Ben mentioned one. I think I can't exactly remember if it was initializers or codable, like kind of automatic. Oh yeah, I think it was if you start writing out like the coding keys, it will like automatically start writing the encode to encoder and init from decoder implementation. So that's pretty cool. Good,
Yeah.
good things to just speed up the everyday, kind of
Quality of
mundane code
life.
that you write. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure we can fill an entire episode with Xcode
Yeah,
14
no doubt.
improvements. So we will, because it's sometimes hard to think of topics. So, um, like I can imagine a whole episode on Xcode 14, a whole episode on
Yeah,
Swift. We've got content coming. That's for sure. Like, comment, subscribe. I guess that only works for like half of what we're doing, right? Because we're on YouTube technically. So, like, comment,
yeah.
subscribe on YouTube, or share with your friends and family on podcasts.
There we go.
Talking about more improvements to SwiftUI, if you happen to be developing a Mac app, or if you happen to be developing an iPad app for one of these newfangled M1 Macs, M1 iPads, blah, blah, now you have a whole bunch of new options for windowing with SwiftUI, which is like, finally. I always found it like really weird that they revealed oh, you have an app-based like thing for SwiftUI, but it's like we have no story for windowing at all, and it just felt like incomplete, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, that was one of the things that as soon as we started kind of internally knowing that we were going to build or release the app for Apple Silicon Macs, we started looking into, okay, let's build a preferences window and kind of these ancillary windows that you would normally find on a Mac app, but you
It's a
you
settings
couldn't.
window now, Spencer.
Right, sorry. But yeah, now, like as of this week, but you couldn't do it unless you made your app a Catalyst app, and then you'd have to have an AppKit target where you could actually import AppKit, and you'd have to communicate that way, and it was just not possible. So having this actually be a part of sort of Swift UI that you could actually use in an iPad with that stage manager, or on an Apple Silicon build of the app is awesome. And they added, it's gonna, so I think they had like three kind of window, what do they call them? Window groups or window styles? I can't remember. But they added that settings one for a preferences window. They also added one that the name is going to escape me to add menu bar,
Status
kind of,
menu,
yeah,
UI status item, blah,
yeah,
menulets in old parlance, menu extras in modern parlance,
yes.
whatever you want to call them.
So yeah, but now kind of expanding out to actually make again SwiftUI sort of a feasible thing that you could write an entire app on for a Mac with just SwiftUI, not having to dive into AppKit. So that's cool too.
Yeah, and as you said, this goes over to the iPad as well now. So if you want to make like a single window that has nothing to do with anything else, it's not gonna multiply out with different scenes or anything like that. Then
Right.
now that's now possible. You can go ahead and make a window. You can open it from anywhere by like an identifier of your choosing, and that just works, which is super super neat. So I really do think this is like a big finally moment for SwiftUI, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they take this further, because I'm sure there are aspects that are still missing once you like dig deeper than the top layer here. But this goes directly into kind of how we can navigate within Windows as well, and navigation view is on its way out. And to replace that, we now have navigation split view and navigation stack.
Yeah, so this is one that I didn't see much of, but one thing I do remember, and Dimitri's definitely going to be able to probably correct me and explain it in much more detail. But I think one of the big things with these navigation stacks is it was sort of dynamic to the point where you could like have you could basically define, like on an iPad that has a bunch of width, you could have it seemed like separate views or something for kind of the list that shows up on the side and then on the right, and then it would automatically kind of like if you're on an iPhone, it would automatically make that go into just a single view, like a list view, and then you tap on that and it would just sort of convert it over to just like basically a detail view, like a segued detail view in some way. I'm not doing a great way of explaining it. I'll pass it over to Dimitri.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it kind of was a UI split view controller and a navigation UI navigation controller in one. And it did too much, I think, because it did not allow you to customize the exact behavior very well as a result of doing too much. So one benefit of having the navigation now be split up like this is you have a ton more options as far as what you want to do. So navigation split view is purely just the split view aspect where you either get a multi-column layout, like 2 or 3 on larger devices, or you get a single column layout on iOS devices or iPhones, or just smaller with multitasking scenarios. Now that's the navigation split view. The navigation stack acts like a navigation controller, but instead of just being magic, and from SwiftUI's point of view, you just have navigation links and they automatically do something. Yeah. You have state directly attached to the navigation stack. And this is important because it allows you to go ahead and record the state or set the state directly. So you can have a navigation path or a list of navigation items. You pass that to your navigation stack. And then if you have a navigation link, you can automatically allow it to append to the navigation stack that it's within. Or you can go ahead and skip navigation links entirely and manually add or remove from your navigation stack. And the way navigation stack redirects to the next screen is you have a bunch of handlers for the type of data that you might encounter within your path. So if you have a bunch of homogeneous data, like you're looking at menus in a recipe app, for instance, or a restaurant finding app, for instance, then you can have a handler for menu. And then anytime a menu thing gets pushed, it will build that view. Or you can have a handler for something else. You can have mixed handlers, and they will each individually kind of go in different directions on your behalf. So there's a whole ton of flexibility there that really allows you to customize the navigation in a way that just wasn't possible. Like you used to be able to have like a state that you can say, oh, the navigation link is enabled or not, and it never worked. Especially for like state restoration, it was really, really broken. But now you can have your navigation stack like have that state be completely restorable, and then you will be able to just reuse it when your app launches back up again, and you can say, hey, the state is this, and the navigation stack will be like, okay, I'm displaying this. And of course, these things compose, so you can have a navigation stack within a split view, and it knows exactly what to do. They'll combine into one stack if you're on a smaller device. I don't know what happens if you stack navigation stacks, but I imagine something will happen. So who knows what. That's kind of a problem with these kind of declarative things, is you really don't know like where the magic kind of breaks down. But this is like an easier to reason with scenario that Apple can build testing around. So hopefully that can become a supported configuration and it has a known like outcome. They combine or you get 2 bars, one of those 2 scenarios, right? So that's down to Apple to figure out. But yeah.
As long as it's consistent, right?
Exactly.
So we've definitely talked about this in a past episode where I think it was you, maybe it was Ben, who said, SwiftUI is basically maybe, I don't know if you said not ready or just it's very janky to kind of get a full app working with SwiftUI because of the issues with like navigation view. So do you think this stuff will solve that problem for the most part or completely to the point
I
where
think
navigation becomes a lot more of a feasible thing?
it ultimately depends if you can customize the navigation bar. And I think they said you can. I did not watch every session. There are over 175 sessions, which is like
Yeah.
way more than any single person can watch in a week. It kind of reminds me of like past WWDCs where you could watch 6 sessions a day. Like that was your limit
Yeah.
because you had to go
That's all
into a
there were.
room and wait for it, and there's a schedule, and that was that. But now, since there are a whole bunch of smaller sessions, it's a lot easier to just kind of plow through a bunch of them. But even at that blistering pace, you cannot like watch all of them. So we will be continuing to collect information as time goes on, and I have a few ideas in that regard to make it a little easier. But yeah, if you can customize everything about the navigation experience, this might be something that you would want to use in your custom UI'd app, right? If there are still some issues with customizing what things look like, then maybe you want to hold off using this just yet, or if you still need to use iOS 15 and 14
Sure.
support, then you can't use this anyways.
Yeah.
So continue doing what you were doing. But it kind of sets a good precedence for future apps to be able to use it. Of course, if you're using the standard UI, then go for it, right? If there's little you need to customize, then there's little you need to worry about breaking, right? The more hacks you have, traditionally, the more breaking will occur in future OSs. And this is why I usually suggest like go ahead and have some snapshot testing for all your views, regardless of if you're going to be breaking them or if Apple will be breaking them. At least when a new beta comes out, you can be proactive about installing that in a VM or getting that latest Xcode and trying it out. Just running through all your tests, and you'll know instantly Apple broke this, and this. And you're no longer going to be surprised when the new release comes out and like everything doesn't work. So you'll have a lot more time to either tell Apple, hey, you broke this, and this, or just work around it and like move on with your life. But generally speaking, it's not a whole ton of work. It just sucks when it's a surprise, right? As much as you can do work for yourself so it isn't a surprise, then I think that is the ultimate benefit.
Cool. Well, it sounds like if it's not here yet, as far as navigation goes, it'll probably be relatively soon. And I think they've probably seen the writing on the wall where people really didn't like the way that navigation worked. They've made this change, and hopefully it's a good one. And if it's not all the way there, that it sort of comes maybe next year. So another cool thing that they announced is SwiftCharts, which is awesome because like when I was teaching actually at both boot camps, something that students always wanted to do was put charts in their apps. I don't know why, but it was always like a very constant thing. And they're like,
I know exactly where this is going, so I love this.
We're going to use this CocoaPod, or we're going to use this Swift package, which, okay, great. It's a Swift package. That's fine. But, you're having to... It's a third-party library. It's cool to have something first party. And, again, it's so cool. You definitely watch the session or two. I think there are 2 sessions on SwiftCharts. And it's just amazing how little you need to get going to get... how little you need to sort of provide in order to get a chart up. And if you're like, oh, I don't like this bar chart, I'd rather have it be a line or whatever, you change one thing and it's like, okay, here you go. You don't have to really provide like, here are the limits. It will automatically sort of set limit, or I don't really know what you would call it, like the maximum X and Y values or whatever for your charts. It can just automatically do that for you. Very sort of, I don't know, easy to kind of get up and running, and a lot of customizability. You can have different symbols for each of your different like bars or your different lines and everything, each point in your line. So I'm glazing over a lot, but super cool. And also, again, animatable. There's just one super quick example is they have a bar chart of like, I can't remember exactly what it was, like a food truck or something, two cities, going from like San Francisco to Cupertino or something, and the chart itself, it's like 7 days in a week how well they do in sales or something. And then he switches between the two cities, and the bars just animate straight between each other, and it's all very satisfying. So good stuff there. So I don't know what I would use the SwiftCharts framework for, but it's super cool, and I want to just try incorporating it into something just to try it out.
Yeah, anytime you need to use data, and there were a few additional sessions as well that showed you like how to choose your data effectively, and not just like how to use the framework, but how to think about that. And I think all of those are definitely worth watching, just to expand like the range of possibilities that you have.
Did I go where you thought I was going with the teaching and everyone
Yeah.
wanting to use
That was it.
charts?
I know exactly. It's like, oh, you mentioned students and charts. I knew exactly what was coming. That was such a reoccurring
Yeah.
thing, and I was disappointed that no one tried to build their own chart, because it's not necessarily difficult. It's difficult to build the perfect charting library. That I'll give you. But if you have a single chart in mind and you need to build that, it's not like the end of the world. It's oftentimes very easy, whether it's in SwiftUI or whether it's in UIKit. You just need to like think about the problem and how to solve it. And that's oftentimes one of the things that as a developer you end up encountering a lot, like needing to solve a particular problem. And it's great being able to just reach out to like a third-party library and move on. But it's also great practice to kind of force yourself to think around that problem and how would you solve it. That's what makes you graduate from being a junior developer to something higher than that, is being able to like adapt in almost any situation quickly, right? And you only are able to do that if you do build up a ton of experience doing a ton of different things.
Cool though that there's first party support, and I don't know, for things like that, again, like a charting library, there are a bunch of charting libraries that exist, and I think there are some probably pretty well maintained ones, but it's always nice to have like a little peace of mind where there's first party support, and that it's either going to be supported for a long time, if not indefinitely, if not also updated and improved over time, and just kind of, I don't know, for me it's a little peace of mind.
Yeah, there are very few frameworks that Apple has outright just dropped without like supporting very long term.
Right.
So if Apple does come out with something, you can at least be guaranteed that it won't like go away. It might never change again. It might be exactly where it started with, but it's going to continue to be available. And generally, it won't break. It might break over time, but that's only because they found a new, shinier way of doing it, and they're kind of focusing on that. So there usually is something to move to. But if this like makes up your livelihood of being able to make apps, part of that is making sure that the technologies that you rely on continue to work, whether that's from Apple or from a third-party library. So that's on you to kind of make sure that things continue to like exist long term. So if something does break in a beta, then it's half of your responsibility to let Apple know. Unfortunately, this is the case. I hate that it is, but it is kind of your responsibility. If you rely on it and this will like completely tank everything that you have, you need to make that known to Apple, because that's your only chance of having them fix it. Or you need to move on to using a different technology, or switching platforms completely. Like those are the things that you need to think about when you do rely on another party, basically, whether it's a first party for your platform or a third party. you are dependent on them in some way. So you can point blame and say like, hey, they broke my thing and I don't like this anymore. Or you can be proactive about it in a way that can be useful. It just sucks in both both scenarios, of course, but that's the reality of it. And we are just a single person compared to a giant behemoth of who knows what they're thinking, right?
Yeah. At the very least, like I think you mentioned last week, better to present feedback now while everything's in beta, where people at Apple are actually going to be looking at the feedback, especially for all of these beta features, and hopefully they can get a fix in before it gets released, and everything is
Also a great time to sneak in any bugs from older OSs and say, oh, this started in iOS 16, and then they're going to actually look at it. So
nice.
That's a pro tip for all the people that hate Feedback Assistant. This is your one chance to make it actionable. Moving on to other parts in SwiftUI, we have the ability finally to present share sheets and the photo picker natively, like directly in SwiftUI. This includes also half sheets with custom detents, so you can go ahead and have a native looking UI without needing to build it all yourself, which is always nice.
Yeah, that's good. The half sheets with custom detents were something that I don't think I've tried to make one in SwiftUI, but I definitely tried to make one in UIKit. It's
Just
not
half
hard.
the screen.
Yeah,
That's all you get.
Yeah, not awesome. So little customizability there, built-inness. Again, just first-party support is always great. So there's a cool new transferable protocol, and I started watching the session on transferable, and I don't think I quite finished it, but I believe it's more or less just a protocol to sort of facilitate. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know this is part of it, but there could be a larger sort of end goal for it. But it seems like a lot of it is the ability to transfer whatever data between either Windows and or different apps. Is that kind of the main goal of Transferable?
Yes. So if you're familiar with AppKit and a little bit of it in UIKit, because I think hardly any apps touch on it, there is a concept of an item provider, and this is I don't remember if it's a base class or a protocol, but there are a ton of things that you can do to encode your objects, so that way they can go onto the pasteboard, which is the base piece of functionality for drag and drop and copy paste and sharing and all sorts of different things. So Transferable rewrites all of that and probably still does the item provider in the background for compatibility reasons, but it gives you a results builder. It's a simple protocol with one or two functions that you need to implement, and those functions are actually result builders, where you basically give your preferred way of vending that data. And then you can give proxy variations of that data. Like you can give sub variations where it doesn't include all the rich formatting, for instance. And it gives you a very nice API to connect Swift's Codable finally into AppKit and UIKit, rather than using NS Secure Coding, which is just not really compatible with it, right? You'd have to turn it into data and give it to secure coding, or manually implement multiple ways of encoding and decoding your data. It didn't work with structs. So there's all sorts of missing pieces to that puzzle, and they finally come together with Transferable. So although it is especially useful with SwiftUI, it's also kind of a new take on the whole system as a whole, which is welcome at this point.
Yeah, it seemed really cool that it seems like this is almost obfuscated blanket layer above Codable and stuff, where it's if you have something that can be encoded and decoded using Codable, it would use that, but it also had things for transferring URLs and just like sending the location at where the whatever you're transferring, wherever you're transferring to, could just grab that URL and grab the data from there, and instead of having to pass the data yourself and all that stuff. So I think there was one other type that it also did. I can't quite remember, but yeah, super cool.
Going on from here, there are a bunch of smaller little things that got added. One of my favorites is colors now can get like an automatic gradient that just works for the color.
Yes.
You just have your color and you say dot gradient and you put like zero effort into it. If you want to tweak it, like you have to still do that yourself. But if you just wanted something quick and something dirty and possibly good enough, like that makes some super clean code that you can just go ahead and use and not worry too much about it. Similarly, you can add inner and outer shadows on almost anything now. And this can lead to, once again, very ugly UIs, or it can be the piece of detail that was missing previously to like really make your UI pop. And not needing to do a whole bunch of work of like duplicating your shapes to have a second shadow and all that is a huge benefit, I would say.
Yeah. The examples of, for example, the color gradients were amazing, where they had some, I think they were circular icons with just like an SF symbol in them. And they look good, but they were fairly plain. And then they just added the gradient, and it just made it look so nice, so easily. Even for little things like that, very exciting, but also just kind of something built in for whenever you do want a gradient, is going to be really nice. I'm super stoked for that in the shadows.
Yeah. Pro tip when you're using shadows, never put an X offset. Just Y down. Like that's the easiest way to get a good looking shadow. I've seen so many people use shadows and it's always like off to the angle, and that's always a bad looking shadow. So if you want a good looking shadow, just give it a little bit of Y, a nice offset for the blur, and you're more or less good. You don't have to go further. The less is better. As is with most things. It's just an extra piece of detail to really add rather than distract.
Yeah, make it subtle.
And with all of these, like almost all of these properties are now animatable, so you can transition between colors, you can transition between shadows, you can transition between type, which is like the biggest like mind-blowing thing. I don't know if it works between fonts, but it works between font sizes and weights, and everything just like morphs, and it's like so pretty to look at, especially in slow-mo. So now you can like crank down your animations and make them obnoxiously slow if you really want to. It will still look really nice and pretty. So you can do the opposite of what I just said. But I am definitely looking forward to playing around with this.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the final thing that got added, that I remember at least, is the ability to go ahead and specify a ranged line limit on text fields. So basically you can say, hey, this text field should be at least 5 lines, but up to 10 lines. So you say line limit 5 ... 10. And what this means is that your text field is going to be sized as if there were 5 lines in it, even if there aren't. So as you start typing, you can get right up to the edge of it, and then it will start to grow. And then once it hits the edge of that, it will stop. And that was like a great addition that I didn't even think I needed, but now I know I would want to use. Like, it's a very obvious addition.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea. I think that's super cool. Do they have that same thing for text now, or is it just for text fields?
I think it's just for text fields. Text, I would imagine it would still work with text as well. I mean, like, why not?
Yeah.
It's the whole point of having these properties, just be more generic. But yeah, I would say it has less effectiveness for text. Though I guess if it's dynamic text, then it has its use. But yeah, I think this is really cool, and it's kind of made possible also by additions made to UIKit to allow things to grow more freely. So there's a new UI hosting configuration that you can attach to table views and collection views. And this allows the contents of a cell to be SwiftUI, as long as you don't use any UI view controller representables. That's the one gotcha, because you're not in a view controller context. You're in a view context. So you can't necessarily just smack a navigation stack in there.
Sure.
I don't even know what would happen. So that context is kind of more limited, but in order for that to work, where things automatically grow based on what's in SwiftUI, they needed to refactor and enhance collection views and table views to automatically grow based on their cell contents, which is another finally moment that has always been a huge headache to deal with. You need to find a way of telling the collection view, hey, please relay out my thing, but don't give me new data, and all of that. So lots of nice improvements in that regard, which I'm definitely looking forward to playing with in non-SwiftUI land.
Yeah. I think they also added a sort of a similar thing as far as sizing goes. If you present SwiftUI views in a popover, I think it's a little bit smarter about that.
Yeah.
Or I think it's probably just in general in a UI hosting controller. So, yeah, good stuff there. Just the intercompatibility between UIKit and SwiftUI. I watched a little bit of that video using SwiftUI and UIKit. I haven't quite watched the video in using SwiftUI in AppKit, because I'm not doing anything in AppKit right now, but that's also cool that they're kind of thinking about that as well.
Yeah, in the past you would have to wrap your UI hosting controller in another view controller, capture the view will layout, and then tell your hosting controller invalidate the intrinsic size, and then it would have a new size, so then you can go ahead and relay out again, and have a whole bunch of code just to support changing what's in SwiftUI dynamically, which was always not fun. So yeah, definitely glad to have this, though it sucks that it's only on iOS 16. So
that's
I'm
always
torn.
the issue.
Yeah, I'm always torn at every WWDC because there's all this new stuff that you can't use. So maybe in 2 years we'll remind you of all this stuff. It's hey, don't forget, you can use this now. It's been available for a while. And even though it was broken last year, still now it's good. So you can half use it. It's all these asterisks, right?
Yeah, I guess we should just next year's WWDC don't actually cover it, but we'll cover 2019 or 2021's WWDC, and then we'll just
here's all this stuff that got deprecated while you weren't looking.
So yeah, a little bit of a bummer.
Mm-hmm. And then as a final note to this, I want to mention that Paul Hudson, once again on Hacking with Swift, has a wonderful article of everything that's new in SwiftUI. And there are a bunch of stuff that I just did not know about. So definitely go check out that link in the show notes to get the full download of everything that's new. This week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Sticky Widgets. Sticky Widgets is the absolute easiest way to put a sticky note on your home screen and edit it quickly. It's so easy, you never need to open the app itself. Add a sticky widget to your home screen through the iOS home screen editor and tap on it to edit. That's about it. Of course, there's tons of customization options as well: font color, text size, alignment, all conveniently located in the system's edit widget interface. Add as many sticky widgets as you like, or put them in a smart stack. Sticky widgets are digital sticky notes for your phone. Use them however you'd like. Sticky Widgets is a free download on the App Store, and additional font and color options are available for a one-time in-app purchase. Thank you so much to Sticky Widgets for sponsoring Code Completion. Check out Sticky Widgets on the iOS App Store today. So I hinted that a surprise had arrived about a week ago, and it's time to go over it because we're finally out of WWDC craziness. And that surprise is that I got early access to the Opal C1 camera. So this is a webcam that has a 4K sensor, and it looks very nice. And one thing that I absolutely loved about it was the packaging is very Apple-esque, where there's lots of origami involved, perhaps even more than Apple's typical things. So it's a lot of fun to unbox, and nice. You don't get to see that because I already unboxed it. But one other piece that I really like is the camera has a cover, and it's just a magnetic cover with a piece of felt, so it just snaps into place really nicely. But it protects the lens itself, so you have a nice lens, you have a nice speaker array. The bottom kind of mounts on any kind of monitor that you have. It kind of clips in on one side and then
Yeah.
rests via that part over there. So you can position it almost any way you want based on the angle here. It has a nice springy cable to plug into either your computer or your monitor on the back. And it has some really nice software that you can have sitting directly in your menu bar to change like the basic camera parameters, or even like apply a filter, change the resolution, things like that. So overall, it's a really nice camera. I'm looking forward to using it more now that I'm back at home and at my like normal setup over there. So definitely looking forward to it. And do note that if you want one of these, they cost about $300, and they are still in early preview, and therefore it's going to be a long time before your request to get one kind of pans out. As I understand it, there's like supply line issues and things like this that almost every company is dealing with. So they're just taking it one step at a time rather than opening up general access before they can actually physically do so. So if you're interested, definitely put your name down. They don't charge you until like it's time to purchase it. So that's an easy way to get your spot in line. And definitely look forward to using it more.
Cool. It looks awesome. Their website's like super nice, but they mentioned like it's got a gnarly like large sensor on the camera. It's 4K and everything. That's super cool.
Yeah, it's quite the large device.
Yeah, it looks chunky, but also I love it. Just nice and square. The everything looks really good. So that you mentioned that it's like those smaller circles are speakers, but are they? Did you mean to say mics, or does it have a speaker?
I thought I said mic.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know if any of the quality is coming through, but there's a very nice texture on it, which is kind of like if you took a paintbrush and you did this.
oh yeah, okay.
Where you kind of like flick the paint
Splatter.
in little splotches. Yeah, so there's like a gray undertone, and then there's actual texture of white, glossy white on top of it. So it's like a very nice textured object. That I realized I already managed to nick it on one of the corners. So yeah, it feels solid. And so far the software seems well written. And yeah, definitely looking forward to using it.
Okay, so let me ask you this though. What about continuity camera?
Yeah, so that is an interesting thing that got announced and was made available via betas, and that's the key word: available via betas. And I got burned badly in the betas from 2 years ago. I didn't even hop on the first betas; I was on the later betas, and my iCloud drive just got completely tanked. As a result of that, I was losing stuff left and right. I was able to recover some of it. But yeah, I don't think I'll be jumping on the beta train again for quite a while. At least until I get fully tempted. But so far I don't have any iPads that can run Stage Manager. And I don't want to be using Stage Manager on any of my like main machines, so it's kind of like pointless to really play around with it further than that. So yeah, I don't think I'll be installing the beta on anything, so I will not have continuity camera on anything. That said, the iPhone's cameras are excellent, especially the rear cameras on the latest flagship models. So I think that continuity camera will be awesome in that regard. It seems to just work in every app too, so we could potentially use it for this context as well. But yeah, definitely something that is going to be awesome to have. I'm just not sure that like I'm going to use it a whole ton, because once you have a purpose-built device, like I don't think this is drastically worse than the iPhone for like what I want to use it for. So
No. I was gonna say I would be surprised, honestly. I don't know. Ooh, it's a tough guess. I would be surprised if the iPhone outperforms that as a webcam.
mm-hmm.
Just
So
because
It might at 1080, but this can do 4K, and I don't think Continuity Camera will be pushing 4K, at least uncompressed, to a computer over the network. I don't think that's going to be a likely scenario, right?
Yeah,
So,
and even if it could, the sensor is much smaller on the iPhone, and they're both 4K, but sensor size is a huge deal as well. So, it would be interesting to see.
Don't forget the image. What's it called? The image. They have like a name for it. Oh, it's escaping me.
Like the image processing, like that whole pipeline.
Yeah, that whole pipeline that Apple has that did such an amazing job on the Apple Studio display. Like, that's the best camera we have, and clearly computational photography is never going to have any bumps along the way.
No, never. Come on. Especially if you update the firmware on your monitor and everything. Oh wait, not if it's
and
not
it might crash
signed.
along the way. And yeah, I don't know what happened there. Like, did Apple not notice that it just does not look good for almost anyone?
I don't know, man.
Like, did they flub and send the wrong parts number to the manufacturer, and then they put crappier cameras? I really don't get it. It doesn't make any sense, especially when the iPad with the same feature looks great. So yeah,
I don't know. But either way, I'm super excited to see what I mean. Okay, so here's the other thing though with continuity camera. Even if it could do 4K, you could have it as a replacement or an alternative to the Opal. Then you can't have your phone. You can't use your phone at the same time, and that to me is
think of that.
ugh. I mean, not that I would generally use my phone on a web call, but there have been a couple episodes, especially lately, where I can't remember if we were checking something on the App Store, but I did have to grab my phone while we were recording. So there's also that. It's just unusable while it is being used as a webcam. So that's kind of a bummer as well.
I mean, the other benefit of using phones on webcams is I have my phone right in front of me right now, and you cannot see it from the webcam. From the magic of perspective. So if I have my hand here, anything below my hand, which is basically covering you, so I have to lift my phone quite a bit for it to be visible. I can just say I'm looking at a window down near my dock, and no one would be any wiser that I'm just wasting the meeting time away and getting through it as fast as possible by not paying attention. So, yeah.
That's where you need that, desk, whatever they called it, where it uses the ultra-wide camera and can show
oh, no, then it will see my phone.
But it's using your phone.
But I won't have my phone for that. Instead, I'll just be mucking around on my computer.
Yeah.
The perfect alternative. Who knew? You have a good computing device right in front of you. It might be slower than your phone, but anyway, as always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter at CodeCompletion to know exactly when new episodes get released, and feel free to tweet at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis, that's SpencerCurtis, on Twitter for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Bouniol, that's DimitriBouniol, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, no, I can't use a mouse anymore. Cat hair in the sensor.
Better than a rollerball.
Honestly, not sure. Because, every, 20 minutes or so, cat hair is, super thin compared to human hair. So it, gets in the crevice of the little sensor. And it's not like you can get it out of there. You have to, pull out tweezers to really, pull it out. And it's ever so subtle. As you're moving the mouse, the cursor will just jump in weird ways, or sometimes it gets perfectly aligned where just the mouse does not move in one direction at all.
Nice.
So yeah,
That's
you just have to
use a trackpad.
Ooh, shots called. But I was gonna say I'm using my my Nintendo Youth, so I have a representative shirt here.
Very nice.
Yep, and I'm using the skills that I learned of blowing cartridges back and forth as a harmonica to get dust and cat hair out of the cartridge. People say that did nothing. I say they did not own cats. Because if you own cats, it did something. Because cats put cat hair everywhere, and that's just part of them being fluffy, cute creatures. They're just fluffy, and part of being fluffy is having micro hairs everywhere, and yeah. So.
That's fair.